As I ring the bowl this morning, let us reflect not only on this ceremony of spiritual expression, our service today, but also on that service that we are called to provide to others. Thank you. Well, good morning and welcome, members, friends, and visitors to the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River, where our mission is to inspire, inform, and support all who seek spiritual and personal growth and a more equal and just community. I'm Nancy Holland, your service leader this morning, joined by our guest speaker, Rosie Ramsey Granillo, familiar to all of us here, not only as the daughter of Marcy and John, yay, but as director of the Kent County Local Management Board. And for those who aren't too familiar with that, the board's core functions are in identifying priorities, targeting resources, and coordinating the collaboration for child and family services in Kent County. So it's a big job and a necessary one, and we're so pleased that Rosie's here this morning to speak to us on how we help and why it matters. Also this morning, we have Michael on the piano, thank you, David from our spectacular tech team in the rear, and the staff and volunteers, as noted in your order of service, who make this and every Sunday possible for us. We are so grateful for all of you. And we are grateful that all of you are here this morning, whether in person or on our Zoom feed. We welcome you, and we're also very glad that we have some youth with us this morning. I have two announcements following up on sort of worship. Our worship committee is now consists of three, Jan Sprinkle, Annie Lavin, and I, are carrying the bulk of the Sunday service work. Sunday service, of course, is the reason this church even exists. So we are hoping that there might be some more of you out there that would be interested and willing and enjoy the opportunity to be part of preparing our worship services. And this will be an exciting year going ahead too, because as you know, we will be hiring a new minister. So that will be an opportunity to meet and work with this new person and work on how we will continue to provide outstanding services on Sunday morning. So if you have any interest or your curiosity is piqued, please see Annie or myself or Jan. You don't have to start out conducting a whole service like this. It's not intimidating, but obviously it's the core of what we do here. A second announcement, don't forget to buy your tickets to the Brownings Pizza and Trivia Night. That's on April 12th at their home near, oh, it's here. Oh, wonderful. I thought carpooling and all. Okay, here. Oh, well, there's no reason not to come then. Sue, Reverend Sue will be leaving, and she and her husband Bill have graciously offered this for our auction. Tickets are $20. The money will go toward the auction proceeds. So pizza and fun and beer and trivia. I think it's going to be like UU service trivia. So more than that, okay. But it'll be fun. It'll be fun. Whatever it is, it'll be fun. Yes, and you can buy tickets after service today or next week. Right up. Okay. All right, and now we'll light the chalice. So there are new words in your order of service, and Whipple is going to come up and help me this morning. No? Oh. Okay, that's fine. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, knowing that this morning many others across the land around the world are doing the same. For us and for our far-flung kin, it is a light of peace, of justice, and of love. But without work, these aspirations flicker out as soon as the candle is extinguished. Let us all join together to accept the challenge of doing the hard work that makes these aspirations real. And now, if you please rise in body or spirit for our first hymn in the gray hymnal, How Far Can Reach a Smile? Short, right? They're 4-3. In preparing for the service with Rosie this morning and the title of helping and why it matters, I was reminded of a book a cousin gave me a number of years ago, a Quaker Book of Wisdom. is written by the then superintendent or director of the Sidwell Friends School in Washington, D.C. And it's a lovely little primer, life lessons in simplicity, service, and common sense. And I've referred back to this book a lot over time. So the author, Robert Lawrence William, the former headmaster, wrote it. And as I think most of us know, Unitarian Universalism and Quakerism certainly have many values and principles in common. Quakers start with the belief that there's that of God in every person, and that all people in the world are members of one extended family of equals, very similar to our first principle of the inherent worth and dignity of all. He all goes on to say the search for truth, which begins in contemplation, finds expression in action. And UUs believe, similarly, in the sixth principle, that we must work for a goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. I think most of us want to help others. We certainly want to help friends and family, and often strangers in our community at large. We hope our lives will speak to our values, and we hope to make this a better world in even the smallest, perhaps even just the smallest way we can. And we know also there's lots of research how giving benefits both others and ourselves emotionally and spiritually and psychologically. But there was an interesting point Smith had, I thought, that he says service has the potential for intense gratification and also for big time disappointment. The sense of fulfillment in all altruistic efforts must come from the doing, not from tangible results, and certainly not from expressions of gratitude from the people you're trying to help. Now let's carry that thought a little bit as we go into a moment for reflection. Also from a Quaker Book of Wisdom, Smith includes a short poem by Rabindranath Tagore, who said, the Indian poet, "Let me light my lamp, says the star, and never debate if it will help to remove the darkness." So let us just sit with that thought for a moment, please. Blessed be. And now at the time in our service when we may share the joys, concerns, hurts, happinesses of our heart as we get to know each other better and at a more deep level. So if you have a joy or concern to share, please come forward and I'll give you the mic and I will light a candle for you. And as usual, I will light the first candle. You say this every week, for all the horrors going on in the world, for all those who are suffering from war and famine and natural disaster and illness. Pretty staggering. Anyone have something they would care to share this morning?
I'm happy to announce that Rosie's dog, Jeff, they finally found what was blocking his intestines after 2 weeks. and it was a small toy. They'll eat anything, but he'll be recovering. So
That's good. That's good.
I was feeling whiny earlier in the week from a dentist, bad news from a dentist. Are there any worse people than just, and thinking, why can't everything be good just one time? And I got a call from my brother that he'd been diagnosed with early onset dementia, and a call from my sister that she has to have a heart operation on the same day as the dentist gave me the bad news. And I just wanted to share both the joy and the sorrow. It just suddenly came to me that this is the landscape we are in. Not all of us, thank heavens, but that from now on, there will be lots and lots of challenges around our fact that our bodies are not immortal, and that we give each other a lot of grace and understanding on the days where that seems too much to bear. And also when you turns out that having a bad tooth isn't such a bad deal.
I am celebrating a silly miracle this morning. I was supposed to be with the kids today in the RE room, and I had thought I had another hour to prepare, and I plugged in my computer, and it was 9:36. So thank God I plugged in my computer. Yay. So I'm here.
Yes, I was worried how many people would show up this morning, you know. Thank you all for being here and setting your clocks. Anyone else? Okay, I'll light the final candle for those joys or concerns that we haven't yet wanted to share, but may still be in our hearts. May we take a moment of silence. Blessed be. And now is the time when we pass the basket and ask for your generosity to support the mission and programs of this beloved community, for we are now the keepers of the flame. For these gifts, we are truly grateful. And Whipple and Twain, would you like to go to the RE room with Miss Jackie this morning? Okay, off you go. Right there. Enjoy. This morning we have a unison reading from your gray hymnal, number 562, A Lifelong Sharing. Words by Mother Teresa, and we'll read them in unison. Love cannot remain by itself. It has no meaning. Love has to be put into action, and that action is service. Whatever form we are, able or disabled, rich or poor, it is not how much we do, but how much love we put in the doing. A lifelong sharing of love with others. And now I'm pleased to welcome Rosie to our podium this morning.
Morning. Oh, it's good to see everybody. I was invited to give this talk in December, and I had COVID. That was fun. So we pushed this to now, and of course, like all my grants are due this week, and the dog puked on everything, so it's been fun. And what I wanted to talk about is kind of approaches to helping. So I don't have, if you're looking for kind of a step-by-step, here's 10 things you can do to be better at helping, like I'm gonna disappoint you. And because I think that the summary of this presentation is like, you need to live forever and just like dream a lot and make things up. So, but I was looking at the principles again. I always try to touch back on those before I give a presentation here. And one of the main messages I have about really the way we go about helping, I think, is connected in its core with several of the principles, but especially the inherent worth and dignity of all people. And so, but ideally, before we start taking action, before we are going to help, we have some time to really reflect and think about it. And as I was taught by the Jesuits, you have to have that process of seeing, judging, or discerning, and then taking action. And that's really hard for people, especially in the United States, to take time to reflect and study the issue before we jump into action. But when we embrace these principles, especially about the inherent worth and dignity of every person, whether they're in suffering, injustice, or not, we are moved to build on the strengths and the capabilities of those people who are in suffering, the injustice, before offering help. That, for me, kind of fits in this framework of engaging in solidarity more so than trying to practice charity. We're working alongside them instead of trying to fix things for them. A really fun example, I remember putting this into practice once. Most of my examples today are from El Salvador, I'm sorry, but I felt like if I used stuff from more recently, I would get in more trouble. But I put this into practice once because we had a group coming down from Buffalo, New York, coming to the community where I was living called Octavio Ortiz. And the pastor was like very strong-willed, and he was adamant that they wanted to do some direct service. He's like, I've got people in my congregation, they're really expecting to, build something and do something and really help. And I was having this back and forth with him for a while, being like, we are not a charity organization. Like, that's not how we do this. Like, we are here to learn from each other. There's a lot that this community has to offer. But he was really stubborn. And so I was like, fine, I'll take it to the community board, the board of directors of the community, and I'll see what they can figure out. And so I did. The board considered the request carefully, and they decided the best thing that they could offer was to organize a community work day for when this group was in town. And they needed to mix cement for the community center. They were going to do some repairs, and to mix cement, we had to get sand. And to get sand, you have to haul it out of the river next to the community. And so on the day that the group was there, they got up early, everybody put on work clothes, and the 8 or so people from Buffalo showed up, and the 100 or so people from the community showed up, and we all started taking bags, going down to the river, filling them up with sand, and hauling them back up the embankment to then be able to make cement later. And it was really fun. Like, you have the kids and grandmas and everybody. But you know, for every 2 or 3 bags that my 80-year-old female neighbor was hauling, like, the strong pastor guy could do like 1. So at the end of the day, everybody laughed about how helpful we had ended up being, but ultimately it was a great lesson in, you know, how do we approach our relationship with this community? What is the way that we can work together in solidarity and learn from each other and appreciate each other's strengths and like power and experiences. But kind of backing out a little bit, that seeing and judging process, it also encourages us to look at the root causes, right? We don't want to just identify a problem and jump to a response. We want to see what systems are at play, and not lose sight of like the real culprits, right? The real target that we want to address to actually make a difference and affect change. The Racial Equity Institute, I know a few of you in this room were able to participate in that, those sessions, but they have they talk a lot about the groundwater analysis. So if you see fish in a lake that are dying, do you save the one fish? If you realize there's a bunch of fish dying and there's a whole like kill off in the lake, do you try to save all the fish, or do you try to stop the pollution in the water? And you have to get to that root level cause when you are thinking about how to help and how to address an issue. And this is something I even struggle a lot with in my work, because a lot of the services and programs we provide, they're important and people need them, absolutely. And we use practices to make them more inclusive and make sure that that community voice or the youth voice is being lifted up and that they're participating in the program. But ultimately, are those services and programs really resolving the issue, or are they just trying to do this case-by-case approach? And how much are we doing to address that systemic issue? So evaluating that approach, making sure you're addressing the system and that you're not just like having tunnel vision on the needs is really important, because every grant I write has a needs statement. Every 3 years, I have to do a community needs assessment. And it's a constant struggle to find a way to lift up those strengths, to find that local power, because the very way that we get money and resources to help is kind of deficit based. They want to hear about teenage pregnancy rates and poverty rates and crime. They don't usually ask about what's already here, what do we have going for us, like who can build a really awesome pirate ship out of driftwood that would then draw in tons of people in the community and we'd all hang out and have bonfires every day. No, those are just side dreams. But to get the funding, we're kind of pushed into this pattern, into the cycle of providing the direct services, finding evidence-based models. And in the US particularly, we focus a lot of energy on this at the expense of finding those strengths, recognizing our political agency, our community organizing, the value of that mutual aid work, feeding each other, and helping everybody recognize their own power and how they can help and how what their role is, and how that we all have a role, no matter what we're experiencing. And I don't think it has to be one or the other. I do think services are important, but we need to find ways that our eyes and energy can focus on both. So there has to be social supports and civic education. Just imagine how active all of our committees and organizations would be if we just always had access to free childcare and living wages. I think that this is why the idea that a lot of folks gravitate towards of, oh, well, let's start a nonprofit. We can make a change on this issue. Let's do something about this, has to be super carefully examined. Nonprofits can quickly become consumed with managing those services instead of building that agency and the political agendas and the power within their community. I hadn't really been able to see this and recognize the importance of the civic infrastructure and how weak it had become in the United States until I saw communities in action in El Salvador. It isn't true in every corner of El Salvador, but the communities where I worked were a really impressive example, because every community, even if it was just 100 families, had their own board of directors, like a homeowner association or a neighborhood association, whatever you want to call it. And those boards organized those work days. They set up the agenda, like what their community wanted to accomplish. If nonprofits from another country came in, they would say, oh, well, these are our priorities. How can you help with that? Instead of just taking whatever was being offered. They can speak out about human rights violations, corruption. They fill buses from their communities to go vote or to go march, depending on what's going on. And their children go to organizing workshops. Their children are taught to learn about how to map out the political systems and the levers of power. Community members then do apply for grants and they find ways to improve services, but they don't lose sight of their political agency and their power as active citizens, even when their own government is trying to undermine that. And maybe it's that like constant threat that they live under that like keeps that very visceral. But I also think that, you know, the experience in the United States has really shaped that. And I think that we've come to expect nonprofits and the government to kind of fix problems for us. And we've forgotten a lot about our own agency in that process, and that it's really just ultimately isn't effective if we aren't all involved. So I think that the answer in helping is rebuilding our communities in a ways where helping emerges instinctively, and we all feel capable of finding the best ways to help. I've been reading a lot of climate change utopia books lately, and a lot of those authors are imagining radical possibilities for how we could transform our societies, our communities, to live together, let the planet heal, but also, like, you know, really tackle a huge, huge problem. And I think that kind of visioning really is what provides us the better ideas for what's possible and how we can have the strength to make it happen and help each other. So I don't know, that's kind of what I've got. So I hope that's not too confusing. Yeah, but so does anyone have questions or comments? Harry.
Would you cite an example of one of these projects and what you went through and what the result was, so we get a better idea of what we're talking about here?
Which project?
Any project that you've taken on that you think that is successful and contributed to community?
Yeah, I don't think I have a project. I think projects come and go. I think that what I've been kind of in this field for 20 years, I guess, between El Salvador and Kent County. And yeah, grants come and go, projects come and go, things evolve and emerge and change and transform. And I think what's cool is that those that we're building those social connections and those bridges between neighborhoods and communities so that things can transform and evolve in ways that are more useful to us. So like during COVID, we all spent a lot of energy feeding people and working together to, really do this mutual aid in neighborhoods across the whole county. And that has changed. Now there's Mineri's Dream Alliance, and there's all the lessons that we've learned and people that we met through that experience, that maybe it isn't like a final result that's come from that, but we know each other and we know that we have that power to make those things happen. And we're still waiting to see what the final results can be. So I don't have simple answers.
Amy, and then come back to you.
Well, hi, Rosie.
Hi.
So we are the beneficiaries of over $400,000 from Doris Scott.
Awesome.
And we're in the process of figuring out what to do with it.
Mhm.
So, and there's lots of ideas.
Mhm.
And I think at our core, a lot of people want to give back to the community in some way. And what I'm wondering, because I'm on the committee with Bob and MQ, says we talk about things and that we present them to the board. What, put you on the spot. What, like, you talked about making, engaging in solidarity and not just doing quick fixes, So, and so here's my question as I think, sitting here thinking about what our task force mission is and what we're working on. What do you think would be some ways in which we could make not just a quick fix, like here's a chunk of money, but where we could get help out in a systemic way,
I was looking
resources.
at the Unitarian Universalist webpage earlier too, that a lot of the social justice missions of churches around the country, the way that they are able to approach some of their ministry there is pretty on track in terms of, if you're going to address a community issue, if like you decide to focus on something, how do you do that in a way that involves a lot of community organizing and involvement of the people who are going to be helped, right? So if you're going to have a homeless shelter, have it be run by the homeless, or there's got to be that way where you're not doing things for folks, you're doing things with them. And I think that just takes a lot of listening and relationship building and patience ultimately, which is really hard to sell or pitch as an idea.
I don't believe in throwing money at problems, and I have always been, in one way or another, directly involved in doing what I consider to be good work, teaching and that kind of thing. But as I'm getting older, I feel like at some level I am being looked at as somebody who's aged out of all of that kind of work, that I don't have any gravitas anymore. I'm too old. I don't get it, whatever it is. And I'm really concerned about what Amy was talking about the money that we have and what we should be doing with it. And also the ageism issue as to how would I be viewed if I, wanted to get out there and work with a bunch of kids, which is what I would like to do.
I mean, I don't think it's just ageism either, right? I think anytime you don't have a title or an organization that you're like running or something, it's hard to find that voice and that what you're talking about. Yeah. But there's strength in numbers.
As an old community organizer who's worked with several Unitarian congregations, I think what you're talking about, I used to describe as trying to build a bridge between two clouds. And the first cloud is the organization itself, in this case, let's say, the Unitarian congregation. And the other is the organization, or perhaps lack of it, that you're trying to reach and work with and understand. I think the challenge for any large amount of money and spending that is, to me, would be to design it in such a way that it activates a large number of the Unitarian congregation. And doing that involves some understanding of who we are and where we are. I used to describe it as there are a large number of people in one room wanting to go into another room of activism, but the people who organize it don't understand what it takes to take that first step from one room into another. And so while part of your message is think large, think in depth, think in large issues, to me, the first issue is what's that first step? And how can that activate so many of us who are basically inactive now?
And not just within the congregation, there's so many people in our neighborhoods and the communities that don't think they have a role to play either, or haven't been activated like you're talking about.
Hi, Rosie. I've heard it for a while, and I think it's true, but per capita, there are more 501c3s in Kent County than any other county in the state.
There's like over 300.
Yeah.
A lot of them are just kind of sitting funds, but
Does that make your job easier or harder?
I still feel like I wish there were more groups that I could work with that focus on, children, youth, and families. But it's definitely complicated. Yeah, everybody's, but I thrive off of, talking a little bit to everybody and trying to mix and match people together and make connections. I think that's like the favorite part of my job.
I think sometimes too, some age, I've had the experience personally of volunteering to help with something, and then the organization doesn't really know what to do with you. They say they need help, but when you get there, maybe there's nothing, or you were going for an event or a tutoring or whatever, and the client's not available, but they didn't tell you, or things like that I think can frustrate people. And maybe, so that's hard I'm sure for the organizations.
Well, that speaks to what you were sharing earlier about that. Get ready to be disappointed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I see somebody else who wanted to make a comment. Yeah.
I'm curious about, you were mentioning down in El Salvador about them having boards and like, a plan that people can, in a structured way.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I read that it's actually like a pre-Columbian model. Like they've been doing that since before they were colonized. And it's just, every community runs itself, and it's sometimes out of necessity, right? Because you don't have a government that gives a crap that's providing services at all. And so they have to figure out how to create those networks and survive together as a community. But it's become kind of institutionalized, and they have legal status, and they come together and elect their board and do all of that work. So it's, some boards are a lot stronger than others, but it's a constant effort, and it really does make the community is much more powerful when it comes to managing when the government does show up to provide services or other nonprofits coming to try and help as well.
Seems like something we could learn from. And the
I
United
would
States.
love every neighborhood in Kent County to have a
Wouldn't that be
community
something?
association.
Voices on the Border, which of course you worked for in El Salvador, but part of their agenda is not the right word, but they work a lot in developing community organizations and help out in that way quite a bit.
Yes.
Part of their mission, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
But also the communities, they're really they're war veterans, and that probably had a lot to do with their. I mean, there's as soldiers, there's a hierarchy and a certain working together thing. So I'm sure that contributed too. But
yeah, their whole experience was very politically aware.
Right.
Whether they were in the guerrilla or whether they were in the refugee camps, they knew that their goal was to educate one another, to organize, to be aware of their agency. Yeah, I think Voices followed their lead in that sense of like the communities told Voices on the Border where they would be useful and what they needed, and they were able to listen and stick to that line. And now I'm really excited for them because when I left, I convinced the board to hire a local Salvadoran to run the organization, and that was the first time that a Salvadoran was hired to be the director. And he just hired a social worker to help run the programs, and she's one of the young women from Octavio Ortiz from the community, who was like 8 when I was there. So it's really seeing that organization embrace that local capacity and strength is really. Jocelyn.
Yeah, that's fascinating that they involve the children. In,
Yeah,
we don't even have civics anymore. I mean, I don't know.
Well, we just did a program at the high school last year where I just hired a consultant to work with a group of high schoolers to design their own program. I said, we're looking at this deficit data on mental health, so you guys figure out what you want to do to help with mental health. And so 35 kids spent the whole school year, and they did kind of a leadership academy first. That was a lot of training and learning about, what is mental health well-being, what's trauma-informed approaches, but also surveying one another, surveying their parents and their peers, and looking at the whole issue. And they designed their own program. They want to do cross-age peer-led mentoring, where like seniors will mentor 8th graders. And but a lot of that process was about seeing their own power and their own voice. And in the reflections afterwards, they were like, I had no idea, and this is the only way to do it. And it's super jazzed. One of them got a tattoo. Of their little logo they designed.
Okay, I think we'll take this. Yeah.
But yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, I'm just noticing that the examples that you're giving, and I think that we've all experienced in the last few years, often come from what somebody might call a deficit or a need or an urgency or a pain. Yet internally, we're all trying to never need anything or never have any pain. And yet the wave that sometimes goes through a community, whether it's El Salvador or George Floyd or COVID, is not always comfortable.
Yeah.
And our need to always be comfortable feels like the opposite pole to being in community.
Yeah. And when we feel uncomfortable and we want to help, we have to be able to have the strength to take a step back and say, okay, like where do I fit in this picture? How can I start these conversations with others and move forward from there? I don't know. It's tricky.
Appreciate the work
Thank you.
you and others like you do in our community. being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and now please rise and body your spirit for our hymn Guide My Feet, number 348 in your gray hymnal. You can get this with some. Sure, why not? I'll just play it through once. Okay. So our author here asks, what is the importance of service, of trying to help people you don't know, or of struggling in a cause that may not reach fruition in your lifetime? Well, I liked one response to that question from former Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, who suggested that service is the rent you pay for having a room on earth. And also, I think, there's a common quote that says, work is love made visible. So may our lives speak loudly indeed on that message. And now extinguish the flame, the chalice, the words are in your service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Go now. Thank you, Bob. Go now in peace. Have a good week ahead, and please join us in the lobby for coffee and conversation.